Law-breaking hacks or journalistic murders? That's the question raised by the recent indictment of two anti-abortion activists who tried to take down Planned Parenthood, but may end up doing time instead. Adam has more.
Your reaction to the indictments might depend on how you feel about abortion.
Your gut tells you
a political hit job.
The undercover videos David Daleiden and Sandra Merritt shot for an anti-abortion group became a political cause celeb. Abortion foes claim they show Planned Parenthood selling fetal tissue for a profit.
We've been very good at getting heart, lung, liver.
Abortion supporters insist the videos were selectively edited and highly misleading. This week, Daleiden and Merritt were indicted on felony charges for using fake IDs in their investigation.
Not many people really saw this coming.
Daleiden is crying foul, saying his group used the same undercover techniques that investigative journalists have used for decades. Cornell law professor Michael Dorf agrees.
This could set a dangerous precedent and chill undercover investigations by legitimate journalists.
But Reuters' Alison Frankel notes there's a long history of investigative reporters getting into legal trouble. Topping the list, the Food Lion case, in which ABC News reporters worked in grocery stores under assumed names.
A primetime undercover investigation.
Of course, Daleiden and Merritt's critics contend they're not journalists at all. But even if you agree, their case has big implications for those of us who are.
So, Adam, I mean, in some ways, I understand their point. But as you recall in the Food Lion case, I mean, ABC, lost that case. Right. They paid millions of dollars. You can't falsely represent yourself. So they lost, and they are a journalistic organization, regardless of what they found. So I understand.
Wasn't that fine ultimately knocked down?
Yeah, it was knocked down, but they lost. They lost the case. So, I mean, this really feels a little bit like, an overreach in terms of, the indictment against these two. And at the same time, I have to say, I found that Planned Parenthood dialogue, however it was edited, extremely troubling.
Well, the big question throughout the debate over these videos has been whether they show Planned Parenthood selling fetal tissue for a profit or selling fetal tissue for an amount of money that allows them to recoup the costs necessary. So that's the technical fight. I think the videos had such an effect because they represented in this really graphic, hard-to-watch way the realities of a process that, whether you're pro-life or pro-choice, you tend to think about in the abstract. I am actually sympathetic to the idea that this is problematic for investigative journalism. Whatever you think of the work these two did, taking the principle that's at work here, there are organizations like Planned Parenthood, like massive agricultural concerns that might be abusing workers, private institutions that deserve to be looked at under a harsh light. You can't just FOIA them because they're not public agencies. And to get in there, and this isn't purely a partisan thing, Kevin Drum from Mother Jones, which is pretty left, he has the same concern. He said, if you're going to get into organizations like this, you're probably going to have to misrepresent who you are. You're probably going to risk getting in trouble after the fact legally. This makes a lot of important work that needs to be done legally problematic.
Let's stipulate that they were engaged in journalistic activities. Again, it's always a waste of time to say who's a journalist, but they were doing journalism of a sort. There are no legal protections for undercover reporting. In fact, the process of news gathering really has no legal protections. We're on the same grounds as the rest of the public. The First Amendment is for everybody, not just for people carrying a press pass. That said, I agree with Kevin Drum, and I agree with you, Emily, that this is an overreach. I mean, what they did doesn't strike me as really being that big a deal in the course of carrying out their investigation, such as it was. So it really does seem like there is some political motivation here.
Well, I was at ABC when the Food Lion case came up, and one of the edicts that came out right afterwards was, we're going to examine every single time we decide that we need to go undercover. Do you really need to go undercover to get the story? And so what happened was a lot of that went away, and people were able to get inside by not misrepresenting themselves and by using good, really serious investigative journalism techniques to get that information. Now, are there instances in where it would be better if you could get inside? Of course there would be. But what came out at a network with plenty of resources was that, hey, we're not being stopped as much as we thought when we really pay attention and lower the kaboom. And so if you wanted to go undercover, you had to go through a whole committee at ABC and explain why and show why you couldn't get it any other way. I think that is still viable. And what that says to me then is that I don't know that I agree that they used investigative journalism techniques the way that we think about it. Maybe it doesn't matter, as Dan has said, but I think that's something that we have to think about. And I don't know that it's an overreach if that's the case. I think what may be happening here is that we have to examine, all of us, how we get information, which is hard to get, about companies that may or may not be doing dirty deeds behind closed doors.
Well, look, there's good reason why you and your colleagues at ABC were so careful and meticulous about this, because there are laws designed to protect individuals and the public interest against falsifying official documents like a driver's license, which occurred in this case. Many states have serious laws against surreptitious recording, and, with good reason. And I respectfully differ with my friend Professor Kennedy on the notion that there's no point in debating who's a journalist, because every clown out in the street now has a video and audio recording device in their hand. And if it's the Wild West, where anybody at any given moment can say, oh, I'm acting in a journalistic fashion because I want to eavesdrop on this interesting conversation Emily Rooney's having in the next booth, we're heading down a slippery slope that's going to take investigative journalism down with it.
But you know what? That cuts both ways, because a lot of the attention that we've seen drawn to police brutality in the past year plus has been from your average man or woman on the street taking out that recording device you were talking about and using it to capture something that really demands capture, a fundamental misuse of legal authority. So it's...
That's really surreptitious, though. It's like, hey, I'm shooting this. It's happening right in front of me.
Well, I guess I'm saying the accessibility to these technologies or of these technologies
and
to
that's raising a lot of issues.
I would argue that tape, though, has been then put in the hands of people who know how to contextualize it so that people understand what's going on. That's correct.